So the first thing we're going to discuss is the funding overview. The first grant that we work largely with at the Indiana Department of Homeland Security is the Federal Homeland Security Grant, also known as HSGP. The 3 bullet points you have listed there are actually the 3 programs that make up the umbrella Homeland Security Grant Program. The first grant listed there, the State Homeland Security Program, also known as SHSP, that is what we largely give to our counties and our Homeland Security districts within Indiana for their equipment purchases, training, exercise, planning needs. That is what largely goes to support our local emergency management offices. The next grant that you have listed there, the Urban Area Security Initiative, that is a grant program that really pertains to the top metropolitan areas around the country. That is determined based on USDHS risk rankings, and for the past several years, Indiana did receive this funding because the city of Indianapolis was eligible, was rated high enough in the risk rankings. Now, in 2011, Indianapolis actually dropped in their risk rankings. So we actually lost that UASI funding in the state of Indiana. In 2012, however, we received it back due to the Super Bowl. But 2013, we once again lost that funding. We suspect we probably won't see that funding anytime in the near future unless we have something else such as the Super Bowl that were to occur that would up our risk rankings. So for right now, the only grant that we currently have under the Homeland Security Grant Program is that state Homeland Security money. The key about this funding to know is that 80% of these funds have to go to a local unit of government. We at the state only keep 20% of this award. So 80% of this money goes to support those local projects. Now with that, grant funding has significantly decreased in the past several years. As you can see, in 2007, we received a large portion of this funds. The Homeland Security money is largely known or has a reputation as being the anti-terrorism money. This was the money that was really beefed up in the post-9/11 days. So this money went to a lot of, especially equipment, to deal with anti-terrorism issues. In 2007, you can see where we had $22 million awarded just to our state, and it steadily decreased until about 2010. When you see that significant drop in 2011, that was when we lost the UASI funding. That was when Indianapolis dropped in the risk rankings. Even in 2012, when we received that funding back, you can still see where we had a significant drop in funding levels. 2013, last year, we received $3.4 million. We expect to receive about the same in 2014. But we're having to make do with a lot less money and a lot more need. So we really have to be competitive and ensure that the grant funding is going to its best ability. The next grant that we deal largely with is the Emergency Management Performance Grant. This grant is administered through FEMA, and this is really known as more of the all hazards money, the natural disaster money, in comparison to what the Homeland Security money used to be known as. This supports all facets of emergency management, from mitigation activities, from the response and recovery mission areas. This really supports all of those all-hazard approach options. What this money also does is pays for local emergency management personnel's salary in each of the 92 counties if they choose. This will pay for 50% of a director, a deputy director, and an admin in each of the counties. This also funds most of our state level projects. that we have at the state, such as emergency management training initiatives. Our State Emergency Operations Center is funded largely out of this grant. And then we also pay for agency salaries here at IDHS. So that's what this money is largely used for. Now you can see here in comparison with the Homeland Security money, this money has largely plateaued or remained pretty steady in recent years. Events like Hurricane Sandy really play into what our funding levels are, because this is the money that we can use to prevent and mitigate a lot of issues related to natural disasters. So you can see where in 2013 we received $6.59 million, and we anticipate to receive that funding level in 2014. Nothing has been mentioned to us about any significant changes to that. The next grant that we deal with and that gets distributed to our locals is the Hazardous Materials Emergency Preparedness Grant Program. The interesting thing about this grant program, it is actually administered by U.S. Department of Transportation. It is not a FEMA or a DHS grant. What this money does is helps in planning and training for a hazmat incident at the county level. Now this money is given to local emergency planning councils, or LEPCs, in each of the 92 counties, and it is a competitive grant process. This has very, very, very specific parameters that the funding has to meet. You can see there in the planning and training exactly what it can be used for. But you can also see in this next slide, it's a significantly smaller amount of money than what our other grants are. So we have roughly $536,000 in 2014 to distribute across the 92 county LEPCs. So it's a smaller pot of money. However, it is useful to deal with and plan for those hazmat incidents. The next grant is actually a state grant. The Homeland Security Foundation is funded by the purchase of the Secure Indiana license plates. Those are the license plates that have the cardinal on them. And the proceeds of that license plate actually go straight into the foundation's pot of money. This funds equipment grants up to $4,000 and scholarships up to $2,000 for any local public safety organization. So this can be a volunteer fire department, this could be a police department, a county emergency management agency. So this can go to those smaller agencies that might not be eligible for some of the other grants. The foundation committee is made up of members appointed by the governor. I believe it's got 9 legislators who are on this committee who makes any of the funding decisions for this grant. For fiscal year 2014, the budget was roughly $450,000. Now in the past, we had very small interest in this grant program, largely due to lack of public knowledge about this grant. We did open up a new grant round for this grant at the beginning of 2014 in January, and as of the deadline for the intent, we had over 200 public safety organizations submit intents to apply for this grant. So that's about a 50% increase from the previous year. So this grant especially is one of our grants that's going to become more and more competitive. Now I see Tom has a question. The question is, can a police department and a fire department from the same city apply for the foundation grant at the same time? The answer to that is, who is their legal authority? The foundation has determined that only one entity who reports to the same authority can be awarded this grant in a grant cycle. So for example, if you have a county emergency management director or county emergency management agency and a sheriff's department who both report to the county commissioners, apply for this grant, only one of them can receive the grant. The same with a city. If they both report to the same entity, then they will not be able to both receive the funding. Okay? All right. So we'll go ahead and move on then if there are no other questions about the foundation grant. Like I said, we did just open this grant round. Unfortunately, the deadline is passed for submitting intents, and the application deadline for this grant is actually Friday. We do anticipate to open up another round at the beginning of 2015 for this grant. So the next grant, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Kim Stewart so she can go into some more detail about the Secured School Safety Grant Program that we run.
Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to talk about the Secured School Safety Program. Now, as you probably are aware, that was created in the last legislative session. It was codified in Indiana Code 1021 that defines the parameters of the grant program. And for the biennium, they awarded $20 million in non-reverting funds to this program. The non-reverting funds are important to us because that means that once the end of the biennium passes, then the dollars that are not used are available to stay in that fund. Generally, we find that funds go back to the general fund if they're not used by a certain time. That's certainly true of the federal grants that we work with, but these dollars stay in this fund until they are used. We don't know what's going on or what will happen after fiscal year 15, the grant award that is open right now. That is going to depend upon the state legislature and what they decide to do in the next long session, which will be at the beginning of 2015. They'll make a budget then, and then they will determine if they're going to continue to fund this program. It's important to note that when we talk about these grant funds and the fact that they awarded us $20 million, that doesn't mean we always have the $20 million available or that it was available right away. There is an automatic 3% reversion. So what was put into the fund at the beginning of the fiscal year, which started in July of 2013, was half of the money that was allocated, except instead of the $10 million, there's an automatic 3% reversion that goes back to the state budget. It happens with state grant funds. In December of 2013, the governor was looking at the revenue forecast, the amount of money that had been taken in, and the amount of outlays that were due to occur, and he determined that an additional 1.5% reversion was necessary from state funds. So we didn't exactly have $10 million available to us in that first grant year. However, for that first grant year in fiscal year 2014, we did award $9,097,702 to school corporations and charter schools for the first iteration of this grant. The window is now open for fiscal year 15 funds. I know that's a little confusing and it's a very quick turnaround, but we had feedback from several schools and charter schools that were funded that said that the funds would be more effective, so much more effective for them, if they were available during a time when students were not in the building. So when we started planning this year's funding, we started with the idea that schools would have access to these dollars in July or August when most schools are on summer break. And as we started moving backward from that point, we got to having to have the window open now. So if you are participating in this webinar and if you have not sent in your intent to apply for fiscal year 15 funds, please do so right away. This is the only opportunity you'll have to apply for fiscal year 15 funds, and there won't be another application until we know if funds will be available for fiscal year 2016 and beyond. So if any of you have any questions about any of the grants that we have discussed already this morning, please feel free to convey those to us.